Greetings and salutations. You're listening to Mama Rue's Ancestral Musings. This is a podcast about all things Blackness from an ancestral point of view, but over here we pay specific attention to Black spirituality. All right? If you are new and this is the first time you've tuned in, welcome. And if you are a returning listener, thanks so much for coming back over here. This podcast has always been sponsored by MamaRue.com. That's where you can find me for your readings and your spiritual consultations. Folks been asking me, what are the consultations for exactly? Well, they're for people who have had readings with me before. They may have been prescribed some things to do, okay? And if you need to talk about it, if we need to make adjustments or whatever the case may be, you have questions, concerns, or you just want to check the efficacy of your work, that's how you hit me up. You purchase a consultation. And just like the readings, there are two to choose from based on time. Okay? Alrighty then. Oh, speaking of time, I am on vacation until the second week of January 2021. Now, some folks, when they buy a reading, they want to book their time and have it happen really, really quickly. And that's your choice. But people are still booking up those slots, okay? So if you wait until then, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be guaranteed your reading during the second week of January 2021. All right? Just had to put that out there. Hope everybody's been well since we last spoke. A lot has been going on since then. All right. You may or may not have noticed that I am moving away from social media, and that was for a bunch of different reasons. Okay. This is a move that I've been wanting to make for a while, but I, decided to stay on because of my content, because of the audience I was trying to reach, because the thing about Black spirituality, it's a mass movement now, especially, for our younger generations. And, we are all moving with it and finding ways to reclaim the power that was fueled by ancestors, that power that was suppressed by the oppressor, okay, because they feared it. They didn't want no smoke from our people. So they basically, went out on reigns of terror against our root culture, our root people, to the point where it became almost a self-indoctrination amongst our people to leave them roots and things alone, okay? And there were two types of people who used to say this stuff and still do. The types of people that just don't like talking about it in mixed company. And then you have the people who are fully indoctrinated by Abrahamic faith and, it's all evil, it's all bad and such, therefore. So at this point, it's becoming more obvious to you guys that our tradition of root culture never died. It was alive and well inside of our churches, inside of our homes. And just because the people who will probably be your elders or closest ancestors, they weren't keeping the things from you because they were afraid for you in that sense. They were keeping things from you because they had maybe other reasons. Now, fear played a huge part, okay? And that fearful conditioning was about self-preservation and survival. All right. But in other instances, sometimes elders just chose not to share a thing or two because they felt like you are not responsible enough for this kind of power in your hands. Okay. And that's no shade on you. That's just the truth. All right. That's why those of us who are a little bit more experienced, we tend to hold back with sharing certain information, especially if we don't know who's on the receiving end. All right. So the internet is a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing in that it can spread awareness, but it's also a curse in that there's certain information being put out by inexperienced individuals who think is that, it's okay to share harmful things and potentially dangerous and deadly things with people that they don't even know. Okay? People that they've never sat in a room with, at a table with, people that they've never spent time with in real life and developed true relationships, true interpersonal relationships, where they were able to really appreciate someone's vibe and someone's energy. Okay? So there's just a lot of bullshit that's going on. And, the best I can do, you guys, is continue the prayers that I have consistently been making for the past few years now, that the ancestors gather up their children, protect them on their journeys, but also guide them in the proper way. Now, this isn't something that just happens overnight for a lot of folks, okay? It's going to take a bit of work and elbow grease to really make those relationships stronger. Now, this isn't to say that your ancestors were never around until you threw up that ancestral altar, all right? No. That is not true. The ancestors have always been there, always. But you haven't. That's the difference, all right? So we're going to move into the topic of sexual abuse. Yes, there's a lot of exposing that's been happening in the past few years. 2020, there's a lot more happening this year. All right. A lot of these things that have been coming up, some of these people I'm familiar with, some of them I've never heard of. Okay. The people who were victims and survivors of these things I'm familiar with, and some I just don't know. But it doesn't matter whether I know you or not, whether you're the perpetrator, predator, or the victim or survivor. It doesn't matter. The laws are the same. Okay? There was a HBO documentary called The Vow. I encourage everybody to watch that, not so much because we, it's a personal thing. We have proximity to that thing, but the core concepts of what cults are the same. Okay. They're the same. And there's just a lot to be said about spreading awareness and how to not get yourself jammed up by getting involved in a group that seems really empowering on the outset, but then when you find yourself in, the next time you look up, there's some nefarious shit going on. Okay? Now, prior to me getting off my Facebook, I became aware of something really, really horrible happening. I was Facebook friends with the perpetrator that was doing these things unbeknownst to me, but not 100%. Okay. There have been whispers in the past by a couple of people who hit me to the fact that something here just wasn't right. And in that respect, it was spiritual stuff. In one regard, it was, this elder has people doing things with spirits that they're not comfortable with or weren't really comfortable with working with because they just didn't have the education and training to do so. That was one thing. That's a red flag. Okay. And at the time, the individual's like, oh, you need to just, remove yourself from their friends list and this thing. And it's like, you don't get to dictate to me how I move. Okay. Friendships with people on social media are not necessarily endorsements. Okay. They're not. But sometimes the spirit wants you to watch certain things for a reason, even if the reason isn't readily, understood in the moment. You might have a hint, okay? A little hint. That's not to excuse the behavior or the abuse at all. That's not to say, I'm the spirituality police. I'm the judge, jury, and executioner of everyone that's out here fucking around. All right? Now, for the individuals that have been victims of this, it's just really, really, really fucked up when you have people who are victims, but then because they're caught up, they turn around and become abusers themselves. If anyone who's involved in that is listening, just understand accountability goes both ways. All right. So if you had a hand in doing anything that was abusive, that was spiritually and morally egregious to anyone on any level, there is grace for you, but you have got to make the victims whole. And part of that is atoning and holding yourself accountable. Okay? A lot of these things that were done can be worked out in the realm of, the judicial system, right? And legally. And I really do hope that people who have a case with all the proper evidence will take that route. Okay? The whole going after individuals with, torches and pitchforks, I don't recommend it. Okay? It's one thing to spread awareness. It's another thing to try to go after people just because you're angry at whatever level of involvement they may or may not have had in a situation, especially if you weren't on the receiving end of it directly. Okay? There's a lot of convoluted things. And so when something is layered, context, convoluted, twisted up, etc., involves many, many people, it's best to just stand aside and get your facts straight. Okay? Because even though people feel like they might be moving in a righteous direction, if you don't know all the facts, if you have not taken the time to sit still, get quiet, and lay these things at the feet of your ancestors, you're not helping. You're potentially hurting. All right? You're potentially creating interference and obstacles and blocks that will undermine the true help, the true justice, and the total healing of those that need it. Okay? That's just something to consider. Now, does the shit enrage me? Does it piss me off? Does it make me get ready to, want to roll some fucking heads? Absolutely. All right? Absolutely it does. But we got to move responsibly. We got to separate ourselves from an emotion and stand in a place of objectivity and a place of really understanding what your position is and how you're going to move thereafter. Okay? Prayers have already been sent up on all of these fronts. On the justice part, absolutely. On the reparation and healing part, yes. On the accountability and atonement part, indeed. You don't need to be fronting for the gram or the book to let people know what you're doing. Sometimes it's best to move in silence. And silence is a strategy in and of itself, y'all. Don't be getting mad at people who may have been victims or witnesses to abuses for not speaking out when you feel like they should. You might not be traumatized and triggered by the shit, but that doesn't mean everybody else isn't. Okay? So that's, all I really wanted to say about that part. And next, I just want to talk about how do we avoid situations like this going forward. Okay. Let me start with myself. Okay. My spiritual house is this house I live in. It's the house that my mama lives in. So when I visit her, it's her spiritual house. You dig? But I don't live with her and my other family members. I have my own house with my own family. Have I invited non-blood relatives into my spaces for spiritual things? Absolutely. Because we were all on the same page as far as the intentions and energy is concerned. Will they ever be brought in and initiated or indoctrinated into the ways of my clan? Probably not. But what I like to do is show other people how they can build up their own spiritual houses. And this has to do with your own blood kin. This has to do with your own blood lineage. What I'm seeing is that a lot of folk, Black American folk, they put a lot of prestige and esteem on these other cultures' spiritual houses, groups, Elays, Mananzos, Peristills, etc. There's a draw to them, and I understand the draw. I've dealt with that myself, and I'm probably not even done, okay? They've never successfully gotten me because of my own discernment, because of my ancestors. That's just how it's been for me, all right? I have to step back and understand and accept the reality of the matter, and that is not everybody's got those relationships and discernment. I can't look at other people and go, well, how the hell did you not see that? Or why the fuck would you join that shit? Or, on and on and on, which, is easy for a lot of us to do when we see people do things that we otherwise would not choose ourselves. Okay? So we're all human beings. But what I want folk to understand is that the thing that you think you're searching for is already right there in you. You just need to believe that for yourself. A lot of folks say, well, I don't feel that connection. Well, that's on you. But just because you don't feel something yourself, because it's not real to you, why in the hell would you think it's going to be real when you go join somebody else's shit? And in a lot of cases, some of these more savvy spiritualists, they can see your power more readily and easily than you do yourself. And sometimes they know this going in. That's why they recruit you. That's why they want you there, so that they can use what you got because they ain't got shit. Okay? And this happens all across the board, not just with African spiritual systems, and a lot of churches too. All right? When I was a child and I used to visit my family church down in the country, it was always men at the pulpit. The majority of the congregants were Black women. And even as a child, I thought that was odd. I always thought it was odd. And then when my father became a reverend, and it was still odd to me, but my mom was a buffer for all of that. Okay. She may have been his wife and everything, but she did her own thing outside of the church. Okay. Back then it was called alternative spirituality. And so my first foray into these ideas and concepts was through my mother. Okay. I was too little to understand the language of the books she read. I was an avid reader from a very, very, very young age. My parents taught me how to read when I was 3. And I love to read just anything. But some of the stuff, I was drawn to it, but it just didn't make sense. I didn't have the vocabulary to understand. And sometimes she would take the time to explain certain things to me, okay, in a way that I could understand it as a child. But a lot of folks don't have that experience, all right? And I really have to check my own self when I am doing readings and consultations with people, when I am engaging people on social media, when I'm sharing and dropping certain gems, talking about things. Sometimes, there's just this idea that everybody who's reading what I share is on the same page as me, or they understand as much as I do. And that's really not the case. Okay. So I really have to take a step back and understand that the message might not hit on everyone the way it was intended. Okay? But always trust your own ancestors first and foremost. They love you more than anything in this world. They have never, ever been without you. Okay? But the relationship has to be reciprocal. Once you start recognizing that they are with you, and they are a part of you, it can change your life. That right there in and of itself is powerful. Okay? It's so powerful for some that you don't have to worry about trying to learn to work roots and things. You don't even have to mess with none of that. Okay? There are some people who are so powerful, but they happen to be church-going folk. They don't need to mess with candles. They don't need to do nothing. Okay? But focus their intention to manifest the certain outcome. So this here hoodoo spiritual thing, it's always been here. And we really need to stop doing all of this, mental gymnastics and all what to try to make it something other than what it truly is. All right? It's our medicine. First and foremost. The marketeering, money grab, capitalistic nuance that has been, it's becoming really, really huge, and social media really contributes to a lot of that. That's following the marketeer blueprint. I don't care for that. And I've said this before. The most powerful ingredients that you should be cultivating and choosing from to make your medicine, your spiritual medicine, is out in the natural world. Now, that's not to say there's not a place for a pre-done oil or powder blend or, some candles and powders and whatever. All right. Sometimes we just don't have time. Sometimes it's not the right season, but the work still needs to be done. So yes, spiritual supplies play a role, but they're not the end all be all, unless of course you are a seller. Then it is very important. Okay. If that's how you want to make your livelihood, then yes, these things are important, and you're less likely, if you're on the teaching spectrum, to teach the truth that I just gave you, because you want your clientele dependent on the materials, dependent on the supplies. Okay. Now, I've taught classes on how to do the compounding of certain medicines and materials, but at the same time, you're also going to know that you need to get your ass outside. You need to get outside to get some of these things. And some of the more important and potent and powerful ingredients to your recipes, you're not going to be able to buy from a shop. You're just not. Now, when you get your ass outside, you can't just go picking this and picking up that and scooping up this and digging up that. You have to have a relationship with the spirits of outside. Because certain flora and fauna are going to recognize something about your spirit, your energy. They're going to recognize the ancestors in you. And they're going to try to get your attention. They're going to be like, hey, you seem familiar. Come on over here and let me look at you. And then they'll start letting you know what they can do for you and how. And for most of us, it's not just one thing either. But see, when you develop those interpersonal relationships with the spirits of flora and fauna and the spirits of flora and fauna and the spirits of place, new things start to crop up in those conversations. New things start to come up in those relationships. New knowledge will emerge. And it's all connected to your ancestors. It's connected to the spirits of the land. It's connected to the spirits of the plants. It's connected to the spirits of the wind, the waters, the soil, the trees, the animals. And all we do when we do that is take our place in that circle of connectivity. So everybody's, all up in these groups and shit and rushing to get all these initiations and stuff, only to, end up getting disappointed, betrayed, hurt, fucked up, okay, scammed, losing money. And all of that could have been avoided if you looked within first. There's no power in anything if you ain't got no connection to it yourself. All right? Please know and understand that. It takes time to build those connections. It's just like it takes time to reach back over space and time to make the proper connections with the ancestors whose names you might not know, but they all know you. Okay? spiritual work is called work for a reason. A lot of folks are just lazy. They don't want to put in the time. They don't want to put in the elbow grease. They feel entitled to everything at once, all right now. And as I have said before, and I will say it again, in my 52 years, there are still things that my mama has not revealed or shown or taught me. Because the timing of it all, y'all, that was the key. Okay? She still has much to show me while she's in this realm. She will still have much to show me when she transitions to the ancestral realm. That cycle, that connection, that circle never breaks. We can shut it down. We can walk away from it. We can turn our backs on it. We can teach others that, we don't need to do this. Well, guess what? That's what folk have been doing for generations. And here we are in this time rectifying what all that had been done in the past. All that time that things were not passed down. All the times that we just succumb to oppression and abuses in this world without thinking twice about maybe we can go over here and do what the old folk used to do. The things that we was afraid of, or the things we used to shun and mock because we got more educated and we have now progressed from poverty to middle class. We've gone from no education to having 6 degrees. And so we can turn our back on all that, superstitious stuff. No, there is a reason that a lot of folks in the ATRs tend to find those spaces on college universities' campuses with scholarly academic people who are making very good livings for themselves. So why is it okay for them? But when it comes to hoodoo, for example, oh, well, that's just poor black people shit. That's just backwards country folk shit. Okay? But now we're moving to a different place where, hey, we're putting respect on the name again. It hasn't been easy for me personally doing that, coming from the spiritual family I come from, who happens to not care for that word. We're not going to deny what we do, but there just seems to be a disconnect between calling what we do a form of hoodoo or voodoo versus this is just the Lord's work. We're just doing what the elders did and the elders before them did and such and so on. Okay? I just happen to be different. I've always been a rebel, y'all. Ain't shit new here with this. Okay? But that's neither here nor there. Okay? We've all kind of come to an understanding that regardless of the name that we want to put on this here thing, it's who we are as a people. You don't even have to like the name for yourself. But that's just the truth of it. Okay? And those are truths that we spread awareness about during the inaugural Hoodoo Heritage Month. We continue to do so in the 2nd annual Hoodoo Heritage Month. And we're going to continue doing it year after year after year until everybody's on the same page. Our folk who left the church are going to be on the same page with the people who choose to stay in. What they have to see is that commonality. Just because we approach it different ways or call it different things, it's still the same power that we are drawing from. Okay? And it's fueled by our bloodline ancestors. Same ancestors who honored and revered the spirit forces of nature by name in their tongue, in their mother tongues and dialects. They knew how to sing the songs. They knew how to drum for them. They knew the appropriate offerings to leave for them. They knew the right dances to do for them, and so on. A lot of folk think that, us in hoodoo, since we don't have a readily visible form of that somehow hoodoo is not enough. It's not powerful. We've lost everything. We just got folk magic. That's it. And anybody, can grab onto that and claim it for themselves. No, not at all. That's a goddamn lie. I'm still seeing young black people pushing that white folk narrative. Oh, hoodoo is just a system of folk magic. With Native Americans, Europeans, and African people. No. As I've said before, I have done my due diligence, being led by my ancestors. They've showed me things in spirit, and I've been fortunate enough to find resources, okay, to back up what they showed me, to let me know that what we do in hoodoo has a direct path to the ancestors back on the continent. Okay? A direct path. And we're talking about people that were living where there were no Native Americans. We're talking about people who were living where there were no Europeans. They brought their medicine here. And when they were beaten and abused and tortured and even killed for practicing their tradition, look at our ancestors, y'all. Because if they were successful at annihilating it, we wouldn't be talking about it right now. We wouldn't be drawn to it. We wouldn't be getting our bearings in it. We wouldn't be utilizing it to empower ourselves and make our lives and families and communities better places for us and our futures. They can't kill but can't die. And when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about the spirit of our ancestors, the soul of our traditions, the essence of us. No one can kill that. Now, that being said, when there are individuals out here who only want to center themselves, who only want to utilize other people's power for their own personal benefit and gain, when there are people out here doing petty, stupid shit against other black people, especially black women and children, man, I cannot think of anything more cruel, evil, and egregious. Folk like that have serious wrath coming their way. And trust, it will not be at the hands of some angry person who decided to pick up a torch and a pitchfork and talk shit on the internet. Okay? They've already got that target put on back. The day that they mentally made an agreement to carry out this type of fuck shit, they put a fucking target on their back. Okay? Just know that. It's really fucked up to see people talk about spiritual retribution when it comes to white supremacy and the agents of white supremacy against our people. But at the same time, behind closed doors, they want to turn around and fuck with their own people, hurt and harm their own ones. No. You are not protected, sister, brother. You are not protected from fucking with the ancestor children. And all that tells me these people in these groups, they're all charlatans, frauds, fakes, and motherfucking liars. Period. Because if they had the spiritual currency and competency, if they had bona fide elders of tradition, okay, they would have known. You don't fuck with the ancestors' children. Now, if you've got grievances amongst your group or your house, you've got to have mediation. You've got to have ways to facilitate dialogues. Everybody gets an opportunity to share their grievances. Everybody gets heard. And the most objective members of the group can then provide their counsel. They can give their recommendations, whatever the recommendation is. Well, maybe you need to sit out for a little while. Maybe you need to show penance in this way by doing some extra grunt work, or maybe, you need to be expelled, or whatever the case may be. All right? You have to really understand behavior and character. A lot of folks like, oh, we should have spiritual discernment. It's really easy for us to sit back and say, yeah, you ain't got no spiritual discernment. I got spiritual discernment. That's what told me not to fuck with that nigga, da 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 da. You still have your damn senses. You got eyes that can see and ears that can hear, don't you? You still got a mind to make rational, deductive reasoning possible, don't you? If someone's character is raggedy as fuck, then all bets should be off. I don't give a damn what people say about him or her. All bets should be fucking off. Okay? Character is so important. Integrity is so important. Ethics is so important. So if you don't understand those concepts, then maybe take the time to really understand what they are. Because, yeah, you may have left an unethical praise house, church, or whatever the case. You may have seen, unethical things happen in your sorority or fraternity or any other group you may have been on, even at, employment, when folks have to work in groups and teams and such. So I doubt that grown folk just totally are oblivious to the concept. But those same concepts exist when we have groups of people under the guise of being spiritual houses and whatever the case. So same things apply. All right? You're still dealing with some form of hierarchy or another. It's just like when you're working a job and you've been there a few years, so you know everything like the back of your hand, and you really need to be promoted, right? Based on the requirement that, the acquisition of skill. And then you get passed up for the promotion, and then they do this new hire straight out of college, and they put them as, as your manager, your supervisor. You know how that feels, right? It's not right. Okay? It really isn't. Somebody dropped the ball somewhere. All right? Take that and use it when you are in a spiritual group. Use that same experience and say, okay, I'm in here and they're, the supposed leader, but I have more understanding of things than they do. I'm more knowledgeable about some things than they do. I'm feeling shit that obviously isn't resonating with them on the same level. You feel me? So, folks, let's stop acting like, our things, the most powerful things about we have are outside of us and only accessible through other people that we need to seek their validation and approval for. All right. Just don't. And I'd like to take this moment to remind you guys that hoodoo is who we all are, but not everybody is meant to be a specialized spiritualist under the tradition of hoodoo. Okay. We're all black people, but are we all black surgeons? We're all black people, but are we all black judges? We're all black people, but are we all black astronauts? No, the fuck we're not. Okay? Hoodoo needs to be accessible to every black American person. But there is a line between what we can do as people, just as part of our regular everyday life, and what are the things that are confined to our specialized practitioners. Okay? Now, some people are called to certain practices. Sometimes that's real shits because they are continuing things that were a part of their ancestral legacy that were stopped for whatever reason and not continued and taught and passed down. All right. And a lot of these folks feel like, well, I can't really express my talent, my powers, my skills, my gifts, because I don't have my mom, my auntie, my grandmama, my uncle, whoever is not accessible to me. They don't believe in it. They think it's this and that, and, they're not going to help me. So who can I look to? You can look to your ancestors, child. You can look to your ancestors. All right. First and foremost, because they've been praying for you to rise up in your truth. They've been praying for you to stand up and step into their shoes and walk the walk that they once did. Now, when it comes to how do we navigate, how do we move, how do we learn, how do we grow, the first thing that you should not be doing is turning to the goddamn internet for the answers. That's not to say that you can't get useful information. You can. But let the spirit guide you to where you need to be. And if they tell you, you don't need to be in this room, you don't need to be in this group, you don't need to be following up under this motherfucker, then listen and move accordingly. And I'm just happy to say that that's been the case for a lot of individuals. And that's why they aren't going to get jammed up in cults and shit and spiritual houses with fraudulent priests and priestesses who only wanted your black ass there because they see you as a cash cow. Okay? That's it and that's all. They just see you as some sort of money-making vehicle. Listen, in true, bona fide, ethical, spiritual houses, and I don't care what tradition it is, the leaders of that house, they have a responsibility to maintain the integrity of their lineage. Okay? So they're not likely to want to bring strangers up into the space, especially people who are outside of their culture, outside of their nationalities. But then you have these other people, well, that's what they live for. They want them American dollars, honey. They want them American dollars. Okay. And at first they, in their ignorance and prejudices, they assume that, it was through the white people because niggas over there was broke and poor. But after spending enough time, I guess, amongst American circles with black folk, they started to see, wow, these black people are really doing well for themselves financially. Shit. Well, let me, skip these male Saxons and go over here and play with these black folks. A lot of folks in these diaspora, I don't have to tell y'all, they don't connect with us, okay, on many different levels, okay? Now, this isn't to say that they're all like that, because that hasn't been my personal experience. I have wonderful relationships and had wonderful friendships with people of the diaspora, particularly when I lived in New York City. It was a lot more easy to do because we all lived around each other. So you build those interpersonal relationships with your neighbors and your friends and their family members. You go hang out with your Jamaican friends, they whole family start, they see you after a while, man. They start acting like your damn aunties and cousins after a while. Same with some Dominican folk, same with some Puerto Rican folk, and on like that. Okay? That's just how it was. I miss it. It's not my experience here in Chicago, which is very segregated and polarized, and there's a lot of animosity between black folks and other folks. Okay, that's just the truth of it. It makes me sad. But when it comes to people that you are going to be handing over the keys to your spiritual kingdom, okay, and there's a lot of blind trust that seems to go along with this, that just shows me that, you are spiritually immature and someone is taking advantage of that spiritual immaturity. You didn't take the time to really be empowered and entrenched in your hoodoo legacy first. Now, this isn't to say nobody Black American belongs in any of these other diaspora or even the continental traditions. I'm not saying that at all, because sometimes that might be spirit-led. Sometimes the ancestors want you to be in these things because they might just save your life down the road. Okay? Maybe they were a part of these things and they really want you to be connected to something that they recognize themselves. Maybe the diviner can see that you might be facing detrimental things in your life, and this is a way that you can circumvent and miss those things altogether. All right? And there are people who have been in these spiritual houses who have been thriving for years. Their godparents, spiritual godparents, are also thriving. And so you don't see things like poverty and homelessness and illness and death so much. Okay? These people always seem to level up. And what I'm seeing is a commonality is that these godparents, they've been in these traditions for decades. For decades. Now, I might be wrong, but I'm just saying this is just what I see. I can only speak on what I see and what I know. Your mileage may vary. So when it comes to the matters of the spiritual, stop looking outside yourself. Start looking within. If anyone has any questions about that, you can still reach me at mamaru.com. There is a contact button there. Click on it. Send me a note. Okay? Send me a note and we can talk about it. All right? If you want to book a consultation, you might not get an appointment until after the second week of January, but it's imperative that you book it now because spaces do fill up. I have no control over that. Okay? I have no control once, what date and time somebody picked, but once those slots are all taken, they're taken. All right? But I want us all to be safe. I want us all to feel empowered by our own ability and knowing. Okay? I want us to be educated. I want us to have a little bit of something already under our belt before we start looking elsewhere for whatever it is we think we need or whatever it is the ancestors are leading us toward. I need us to build up our own spiritual